one more talk for you tonight, and this is a special one. Lisa she works in Holyoke, and I've always been interested in her work because I've always been interested in Holyoke. Just being an Amherst resident, I've always sort of felt that Holyoke is such a different community than ours. We lived, I think, in a fairly privileged community, Amherst, and Holyoke is very different. And I think of myself as a fairly progressive person, and I'm aware of this very different and less privileged community that's basically right on the other side of the mountain range. And I'm always kind of trying to figure out where I stand and how I should be feeling about this other community. And it's part of like the liberal subconscious is the whole liberal guilt thing. And as many people have told me, you don't need to go to Holyoke to find people who are struggling. There are people struggling in our own town, but there's a different kind of a mountain, you could say, that prevents us from seeing them. But Lisa is someone who travels over that mountain every day, and she confronts all the kinds of difficulties that we tend to shy away from, the feelings of sort of potential hypocrisy and all this other stuff that usually sends liberals, including myself, running scared. So I wanted to help bring her out here because she deals with this stuff every day. She can share what she's learned from that. So please join me in welcoming Lisa Amato. Oh yeah.
I quit my job over the summer, working for a program that provides services to guys in Holyoke, basically gang members and guys who've committed violent crimes. The idea of the program is to help them transition into lives that won't end in death or prison. And we did this by bundling together all of the services that they need to live an above-board life, and by giving them a place where they can go and feel safe. I was their therapist. That's what I do. One of the hitches of the program is that we were funded in part by law enforcement agencies. And yet when something happened, a violent incident in our program, we didn't feel entirely comfortable calling the police. Our guys lived in a mix of fear and anger at the police all of the time. If we brought the police in, we would lose their trust and ultimately alienate them from the program. But we also didn't want to alienate the police. So I found myself kind of stuck between these two worlds. And the farther apart these worlds became, the harder it was to be in the middle. Eric was 18 years old and homeless, had been since he was 14, living in hallways and cars homeless. And he had a child, and he was trying to be a father to him. But he never had a father of his own, and he didn't know exactly what that meant. And he's sitting there, and he's telling me, I think I need to go sell drugs, because I don't know what else to do. And he's angry that I don't have a more compelling reason or almost counteroffer to anchor him with us. So he joins a gang, and 2 months later, he's in the news for a shooting. This was the guy who told us, who said, I'm going this way. I'm telling you I'm going this way. And there was really nothing we could do to stop him, because it would have meant addressing so much more than getting him a GED or an $8 an hour job. It would have meant completely enveloping him. Sometimes we'd try to pretend it was simple. We'd hear ourselves saying to the guys, you have a choice, which I didn't really believe, but that was the language of the program. There were good choices and bad choices, and to some degree, this would determine whether or not you were a good person or a bad person. Our outreach workers were stuck in the middle, too, but in different ways from me. These were guys who were like the guys we were trying to help, but had come out the other side because they had made good choices. But they were just as conflicted as I was. At one point, professional development trainers were brought in to work with us. Our outreach workers are all men of color who don't check their email regularly or take copious notes and who sometimes curse at meetings. But they recognize condescension when they see it. They said, when you say we need development, what you really mean is you want us to change our personalities to fit into your world. And they were right. We have these norms, and I would ask myself, why? Is it really important that we don't curse in a meeting? When you're white and you're educated and you curse in a meeting, people laugh and think it's cute. But when you're Puerto Rican and you've been in jail and you curse in a meeting, suddenly there's a professional development team at your door. But the thing is, our program worked because of our outreach workers. They were the heart of the program. And it was because of this that I always wanted them to speak up at board meetings. But I knew how to communicate so that the board got where they were coming from. So I would often end up taking the floor, and they would let me. At one point, they called me their point guard. I had to go home and ask my husband what a point guard was. But once I understood that, sometimes I would lose track of myself and where I am in it all. Like I'd want to invite people from the program to my home, but I didn't feel comfortable doing it. Not because I live in such opulence, I don't, but compared to them, I do. I work in the same environment, I work the same number of hours, but I get paid twice as much. I feel, is it guilty? I think I don't want to call attention to the fact that I live in the beautiful countryside, literally on the other side of the mountain, and have a pretty safe and easy life, whereas you're still in it, and you don't really ever get to leave. Is my guilt racism? Is it me taking care of their feelings? Is it me taking care of my feelings? At one point, I was having a conversation with one of our outreach workers. I'll call him James. And he says to me earnestly, why don't rich people from Amherst, when their kids go off to college, give their big houses to a Holyoke family with 6 kids? He doesn't call it communism and redistribution of wealth. But that's what he's talking about, right? So I ask myself, I don't know, would I give my house away? Would I? And in one of our final sessions, one of my clients said to me, Lisa, you have your car and your house and your nice family. You've never been shot at or had to go to sleep fighting the smells of blood and gunpowder. So this is him calling me out, and perhaps angry that all I have to do to leave this world is quit my job and take another one. Just like that. I work with another young man I'll call Constantino. When Constantino was 15 years old, his mother was incarcerated, and the kids were left to raise themselves. Their father was in Puerto Rico somewhere. They didn't know where. The siblings banded together to make sure that child services never caught on. And one day, a local drug dealer offers Constantino an opportunity to earn a new pair of Jordans, to forget about school and deliver packages for a while. And this job as a runner, and it is a job, meant that he could help take some of the burden off of his older brother and keep the family intact, and maybe keep their younger brother in school, which was really important to them, to get at least one of them through. And Constantino was the first person to ask me what I thought of his life. As someone from that world, that's this world, our world. And I was really conflicted hearing this. On one hand, I was like, ooh, thanks for asking. And on the other hand, yes, it's really important that you know you're not a bad person, that you don't internalize these negative messages. Because we really are not giving these guys a way into our economy. But there's Constantino. He's sitting there, perched on the edge of his seat, wide-eyed, really waiting for an answer. And I don't have one planned. And I suddenly find myself just saying, hey, I am no better a person than you are. I'm no more deserving. I'm no smarter. If I had been in your shoes, I would have made the exact same choices. I'm sitting where I'm sitting because I was born lucky. And it was amazing watching his face as this sank in, 17 years old. I was ready for anger, but instead what I got was this palpable sense of relief, like, oh, so maybe this impossible situation I found myself in is not all my fault. My parents, they think I should run for office because they don't think that clinical social work is socially transformative. My parents are Brooklyn-born, old-school Marxists. So I grew up thinking and talking about all of this stuff all of the time. Now it's making sense, right? It started when I was in second grade. I would come home every day and undergo our own fireside chat. The Howard Zinification of everything I'd learned that day. My parents would say things like, don't say the Pledge of Allegiance, or stand up for the Star-Spangled Banner. And it's not that they didn't passionately love the United States. Even then, I knew they did. But you grow up and you realize you're not your parents. They didn't feel the same kind of class guilt. They didn't feel badly about not living like those they championed. Their view was that depriving ourselves wasn't the answer. They would say, it's not that we should go down, it's that we should lift everybody else up. And I never had the brain for the intellectual Marxism. What I'm good at is relationships, not organizing the masses. So, in time, I found this comfy place where I felt at home every morning, listening to Democracy Now!, that same zinification of mainstream discourse. And I felt like, okay, it's okay if my parents die because I have Amy Goodman. And the truth is, I loved the Star-Spangled Banner as a kid. I loved listening to a baseball stadium full of voices singing together. It was my own little secret. Still, in Holyoke, I couldn't help but wonder and want to inspire my guys to make change, to take ownership of everything that was going on, to organize like they did in places like Russia and Cuba and France and Ferguson, Missouri. Why can't we fathom that happening here? And should I be a part of the process of getting that to happen here? And is the therapy that I do a part of the enlightenment process that leads toward this kind of revolutionary change? How do we connect these guys in Holyoke to the guys in Ferguson, Missouri. I know it's selfish in some ways because I'd be sitting there with a client and I'm thinking, don't you see you're a product of a more systemic problem? But he'd be sitting there and thinking about food and diapers. For a very long time, all I heard about was diapers. But then there was that moment with Constantino, watching that truth as it sank in. That was real. That was real transformation. I wanted to hug him, but I couldn't because there are these barriers, not just racial and class and gender barriers, but I'm his therapist. You can't just go around hugging your clients. But it felt like the most important thing to do in that moment, and I couldn't do it. My grandfather gave the biggest hugs. I barely knew him. The basis of our whole interaction was these pennies he would bring over, shoe boxes full of them for us to roll up in case we needed to escape to Canada one day. My grandfather wasn't the most stable guy in the world. He truly believed that the FBI was following him and targeting him for being a communist. But he could hug you. When my grandfather hugged you, you knew you were being hugged. There's this famous Che quote: "The true revolutionary is guided by deep feelings of love." It was with this that I defended myself as a kid. Because my parents treated people equally, spoke truth to power, and were genuinely affected by witnessing the struggles of other people. It was as a mark of their devotion to these ideas that they gave me Che as a middle name. Sometimes I wonder, what if they hadn't named me that? Would I be the same person I am today? So, I digress. This is the job that I left. I quit my job because I was offered another one that came with a raise and a promotion, prestige, opportunities for professional development. But leaving Holyoke wasn't easy. I spent a lot of time and energy trying to talk myself into the decision I had made, and went to sleep every night with profound regret. I remember stewing on it, but not wanting to admit it to my husband because I didn't want him to know that I was having second thoughts. After all, the decision was made. And then it got worse because I started to have to interview all of these people to replace me. And I'm sitting there, and it was like having this out-of-body experience, watching myself sell this program to these candidates, this program that I so deeply loved, and thinking, you don't love this program. You don't deserve this job. But eventually we found someone, and she was good. Great, probably. And she came in and spent the day with me and the guys, and I introduced them, and I told her all of their personal stories. And at the end of each session with each guy, he would leave the room, and she would turn to me and say, "So are you okay?" And then I go to my final meeting with my teammates. And at the end of that meeting, I tell them all I love them. And I'm leaving the program, and I'm thinking, well, that's not something you typically say at a staff meeting. And I get in my car, and I drive to pick up my kids from school. And I drive up to the gate of their school, and I see them see me. And then the phone rings, and I have to calculate whether or not I have enough time to answer this call before they come running up to me. And it's my boss, and she says, "So, the person we just hired to replace you backed out." So I'm like, are you asking me if I want my old job back? Because I do. I do. So I've been back for about a month now. Recently, something came up with James. This is the guy who thinks that maybe Amherst people should give their houses to people in Holyoke. James finally spoke at a board meeting, and what he said was good. It was really good. Afterwards, he was concerned that he had crossed the line, maybe made some of the board members angry. And I said, no, I don't think you made them angry. I think you got them thinking. And he accepted that. And I was like, okay. There are still these 2,000 different worlds. And there's still this vast middle ground between them. But now we're charging into the middle together.